The rain had not stopped for 3 days. Somewhere in the hedgerows of Normandy, a 22-year-old corporal from Wisconsin pressed his face into the mud and tried to remember his training. He was a sniper, one of the few Americans designated for precision work in the European theater. His rifle was a Springfield M1903, A4 bolt action, 5 rounds in the magazine, and a scope so weak he could barely see the enemy at 400 meters. He had been hunting a German marksman for 2 days. Every time he thought he had a position, the German fired first. Every time he tried to relocate, the German tracked him. The man was shooting from over 600 meters away, distances where the American could see shapes but not details, could identify movement but not aim points. His scope offered less than 3 times magnification. The German seemed to see everything. On the 3rd day, American infantry finally flanked the position. When the corporal reached the German's hide, he found a dead soldier slumped over a rifle unlike anything he had seen before, semi-automatic, 10-round detachable magazine, and mounted on top an optical sight that made his own scope look like a toy. 4 times magnification, crystal clear glass. Elevation adjustments marked out to 800 meters. He picked up the rifle. It was heavier than his Springfield, but the balance was different, more forward, more deliberate. He shouldered it and looked through the scope. For the first time in 3 days, he could actually see the war. That German rifle was the Gewehr 43, and the American corporal had just discovered why his own equipment was getting him killed. This is the story of the rifle that American snipers wanted but could never truly have. A weapon so advanced in concept that it would take Western armies decades to adopt the same ideas. And a trophy so prized that thousands of American soldiers risked court-martial to bring one home. The problem facing American snipers in 1944 was simple to state and almost impossible to solve. They had been sent to fight a modern war with equipment that belonged in the previous one. When the United States entered World War II, it possessed no sniper program whatsoever, no dedicated sniper rifles, no sniper schools, no formal doctrine for precision shooting in combat. The Army had dismantled its World War I sniper capabilities during the interwar years, considering such specialized killing ungentlemanly and unnecessary for American soldiers. The Marines maintained a thread of institutional knowledge, but nothing approaching a systematic program. When war came, both services scrambled to improvise solutions from whatever was available. The rifle they chose was the M1903 A4 Springfield. On paper, this sounds reasonable. The Springfield action was legendary for accuracy. American target shooters had dominated international competition with variants of this rifle for decades. The .30 caliber cartridge was powerful and flat shooting. What could go wrong? Everything. As it turned out, the M1903A4 was not a precision instrument carefully crafted for the sniper's art. It was a standard service rifle pulled from the production line and fitted with a commercial hunting scope. No special selection for accuracy. No hand-fitting of components. No testing beyond basic function checks. Remington manufactured 28,365 of these rifles between January 1943 and June 1944, and not a single one was required to meet any accuracy standard before being shipped to the front. The scope was worse. The Weaver 330C was a civilian hunting optic designed for shooting deer in American forests, not for killing men in combat. It offered roughly 2.5 times magnification, a low-power optic that barely improved on the naked eye. The tube diameter was 3/4 of an inch, so narrow that the scope gathered almost no light in the dawn and dusk hours when snipers do their most important work. The commercial construction meant the scope was not waterproof. In the rain and humidity of France, Italy, and the Pacific, these scopes fogged internally, filled with condensation, and sometimes simply fell apart. The mounting system used screws that vibrated loose during normal carry. Replacement parts were not available in the field. When a scope failed, which happened regularly, the sniper became just another rifleman. The Army knew the Weaver was inadequate. The Lyman Alaskan scope was vastly superior, but Lyman could not produce them in sufficient quantities. So the Army bought cheap commercial Weavers and sent young men to war with equipment that would have embarrassed a serious deer hunter. Consider the mathematics of this failure. At 400 meters, a man standing upright presents a target roughly 18 inches wide at the shoulders. Through a scope of about 2.5 power, that target appears as if it were 160 meters away to the naked eye. Difficult, but possible. At 600 meters, that same target through the same scope appears as if it were 240 meters away. Still technically visible, but precise shot placement becomes largely a matter of luck. Beyond 600 meters, the American sniper was essentially blind. The German sniper, looking back through his 4-power scope, saw that same target at 600 meters as if it were 150 meters away. The difference between luck and skill, the difference between life and death. The rifle that German marksmen carried into battle against American forces represented something genuinely new in military small arms. The Gewehr 43 was not simply a semi-automatic rifle with a scope attached. It was one of the earliest mass-issued attempts at a squad-level semi-automatic precision rifle, a concept so ahead of its time that it would take Western armies decades and several wars to formalize at scale. To understand how this weapon came to exist, we must travel east to the frozen battlefields of 1941. When German forces invaded the Soviet Union in June of that year, they encountered something unexpected. Soviet infantry carried semi-automatic rifles in significant numbers. The SVT-40, designed by Fedor Tokarev, gave ordinary Red Army soldiers the ability to deliver aimed fire at twice the rate of German troops, carrying bolt-action carabiner 98s. German soldiers were not impressed by Soviet marksmanship, but they were terrified by the volume of fire. A single Soviet rifleman could pin down a German squad, not through accuracy, but through the sheer number of rounds coming down range. Kill the rifleman and another would take his place, grabbing the fallen soldier's rifle and continuing the suppression. German engineers had been working on semi-automatic rifle designs since the 1930s, but none had proven satisfactory. The Gewehr 41, which entered limited production in 1941, was a disaster. It used a complex muzzle trap system to capture propellant gases and cycle the action. The system clogged constantly, required obsessive cleaning, and added significant weight to an already heavy rifle. Frontline troops hated it. The program produced enough rifles to be seen at the front, but never enough to matter. The solution came from an unlikely source. German ordnance officers captured intact SVT-40 rifles and shipped them back to the Walther factory for analysis. What they found was elegant simplicity. The Soviet rifle used a short-stroke gas piston tapped from a port in the barrel, a system far more reliable and easier to manufacture than the German muzzle trap design. Walther engineers essentially copied the Soviet gas system and mated it to an improved Gewehr 41 receiver. The result was the Gewehr 43, which entered production in October 1943. Later redesignated the carabiner 43 in April 1944, the weapon was identical under both names. The change was purely administrative. The numbers tell the story of German industrial priorities. Total production reached 402,713 rifles between October 1943 and May 1945. 3 companies manufactured the weapon. Walther, using the production code AC, built the largest numbers. Berlin-Lübecker Maschinen and Fabric, codes DUV and QVE, contributed significant quantities. Gusloff-Werke, code BCD, rounded out production. Nearly every rifle left the factory with a critical feature. Machined into the right side of the receiver was an integral scope rail. Unlike American rifles, which required drilling and tapping hardened steel to mount optics, the Gewehr 43 was designed from the first drawing to accept a telescopic sight. Nearly every rifle was a potential sniper weapon. This was not an afterthought. This was doctrine-made steel. The specifications reveal a weapon optimized for a role that did not yet officially exist in any army's table of organization. Overall length measured 1,115 millimeters, roughly 44 inches. Barrel length was 550 millimeters, about 22 inches. Weight empty came to 4.3 kilograms, 9.5 pounds. The 10-round detachable box magazine doubled the capacity of the Springfield and could be changed in seconds rather than loaded 1 round at a time through the action. The 7.9 2x57mm Mauser cartridge was ballistically comparable to the American 30-06, with similar range and terminal performance. Practical rate of fire for aimed shots reached 20 to 30 rounds per minute, roughly double what a skilled bolt-action shooter could manage. If you are finding this history of German engineering and American improvisation interesting, a subscription helps more than you know. Now let us examine the component that truly separated the Gewehr 43 from its American competition. The Zelfenrohr 4, designated ZF4 in German military terminology, was not merely a scope. It was an integrated fire control system designed specifically for the Gewehr 43 and representing the culmination of German optical expertise. 4 times magnification. This single specification changed everything. Where the American sniper squinted through low-power optics of roughly 2.5 times magnification, trying to distinguish a man from a tree stump, the German marksman saw his target with clinical clarity. The difference between 4 power and 2.5 power may sound modest, but in practical terms, it represented a significant improvement in target identification and precise aim point selection. The field of view measured 4.5 degrees, adequate for target acquisition without the tunnel vision that plagued higher magnification optics. The 3-post reticle, a distinctly German design, provided quick target alignment with the center post used for precise aiming and the flanking posts for range estimation. Most impressively, the elevation turret was calibrated with a bullet drop compensator marked from 100 to 800 meters in 50-meter increments. The marksman did not need to calculate holdover for different ranges. He estimated the distance, dialed the appropriate setting, held center mass, and pressed the trigger. The scope did the ballistic mathematics. Windage adjustment used a 9-hash mark system with 2 clicks per mark, allowing precise compensation for crosswind without the guesswork that plagued American shooters using hunting scopes designed for windless forests. 4 German optical companies manufactured ZF-4 scopes under wartime contracts. Voigtländer produced approximately 73,000 units, the largest quantity. Optico Techna in occupied Czechoslovakia contributed around 40,000. A GFA made roughly 3,500. Zeiss, despite their legendary reputation, manufactured only about 100 examples, possibly prototypes or evaluation units. Total scope production reached approximately 116,000 units. Of these, roughly 50,000 were mounted on Gewehr 43 rifles designated for the Sharpshooter role. The remainder went to other applications or remained in storage as the war ended. Quality, however, varied dramatically. Testing conducted at the infantry school at Doberitz in 1943 and 44 revealed significant problems. Some scopes exhibited parallax errors, where the point of aim shifted depending on eye position behind the scope. Reticles arrived misaligned from the factory. Elevation knobs drifted during normal carry, losing their zero. Seals failed and allowed moisture inside. Internal lens elements separated from their mountings. Voigtländer scopes suffered the worst quality issues, which was particularly problematic given they produced the majority of units. By late 1944, Allied bombing had devastated German precision manufacturing. Optical glass quality declined. Assembly was rushed. Inspection was cursory. A scope that left the factory in October 1944 was unlikely to match the performance of one manufactured a year earlier. Yet even degraded ZF-4 scopes outperformed American Weaver optics. A mediocre 4-power scope still magnified more than an excellent 2.5-power scope. The fundamental capability gap remained. German tactical doctrine for the scoped Gewehr 43 reveals thinking far ahead of its time. The weapon was not issued to traditional snipers, the lone hunters who crawled into position before dawn and waited hours for a single perfect shot. Those men continued to use the bolt-action Carabiner 98 with high magnification optics, some reaching 6 or even 8 times magnification for extreme range work. The Gewehr 43 went instead to a new category of soldier, the Scharfschütze, which translates roughly as sharpshooter rather than sniper. The distinction mattered enormously. German infantry doctrine called for 19K 43 rifles per company along with 10Z F4 scopes. Company armourers were instructed to test all 19 rifles for accuracy and assign the 10 scopes to the most precise examples. This created a pool of designated marksmen within each company, soldiers who could extend the unit's engagement range beyond what ordinary riflemen achieved with iron sights. This was not sniping in the traditional sense. These men moved with their squads. They engaged targets of opportunity. They provided precision fire support during attacks and defense. They filled the gap between the ordinary rifleman, effective to perhaps 300 meters, and the dedicated sniper, engaging targets at 800 meters or beyond. The 10-round magazine enabled suppressive precision fire during mass infantry assaults, a particularly valuable capability on the Eastern Front where large-scale attacks were common. A sharpshooter could engage multiple targets rapidly, transition between threats, and maintain continuous fire support without the delay of cycling a bolt action. The Germans called this concept the Selbstladegewehr mit Zielfernrohr, the self-loading rifle with telescopic sight. No other army had institutionalized this idea. The Americans certainly had not. They were still treating snipers as specialized outsiders rather than integral components of infantry units. German sniper schools established in late 1943 at locations including Seeteler Alpe in Austria, Stablach in East Prussia, and Waldflecken in Bavaria offered approximately 4-week courses. Students learned patience, distance estimation, deception techniques, terrain utilization, and the use of decoy dummies with remotely fired rifles to draw enemy fire. They were expected to reliably hit small targets at ranges of 300 to 400 meters without fail, but the most respected German snipers, the ones with hundreds of confirmed kills, often preferred the old bolt action over the new semi-automatic. Matthias Hetzenauer was an Austrian mountain trooper who became one of the deadliest snipers in history. Serving with the 3rd Mountain Division on the Eastern Front, he accumulated 345 confirmed kills between 1943 and 1945. His longest confirmed shot stretched to 1,100 meters, nearly 3/4 of a mile. Hetzenauer used the Gewehr 43 only occasionally. His primary weapon remained the scoped Carabiner 98, fitted with a 6-power Zeiss optical sight. He reportedly stated that a true sniper does not need a semi-automatic weapon if he is employed properly. One shot, one kill. The bolt action forced discipline. It forced the shooter to make every round count because cycling the bolt took time during which the target might move or take cover. The Austrian sniper understood something that escaped many armchair theorists. Semi-automatic fire encouraged waste. It encouraged the shooter to take hasty follow-up shots instead of waiting for the perfect first shot. For a traditional sniper operating alone deep behind enemy lines, ammunition conservation mattered more than rate of fire. Joseph Allerberger told a different story. This Austrian Gebirgsjäger, also serving on the Eastern Front, accumulated 257 confirmed kills. He began the war as a machine gunner and transitioned to sniping almost by accident after demonstrating exceptional marksmanship. Allerberger primarily used the Carabiner 98 for traditional sniper work, the patient hunting that defined his early career. But he employed the Gewehr 43 toward the war's end for close in-patrol shooting, exploiting the 10-round magazine during encounters at ranges under 300 meters. When Soviet forces launched massed infantry assaults, the semi-automatic action allowed him to engage multiple targets rapidly, something impossible with a bolt action. Different tools for different tasks. This nuance is critical to understanding why the Gewehr 43 represents a new concept rather than simply a better sniper rifle. It was not designed to replace the traditional sniper. It was designed to create a new category of precision shooter, one that would not be formally recognized in Western armies for another 60 years. The numbers from the Eastern Front tell the broader story. German records suggest that snipers accounted for a disproportionate share of Soviet casualties on some sectors of the front, though exact figures remain disputed. A single skilled marksman with proper equipment could neutralize dozens of enemy soldiers, tie down entire companies, and create psychological terror disproportionate to the resources invested. Soviet commanders responded by deploying counter-sniper teams and artillery barrages against suspected sniper positions, allocating assets far in excess of what a single rifleman would normally justify. The Soviets learned this lesson earlier than anyone. Red Army sniper schools had operated continuously since the 1930s, producing thousands of trained precision shooters by 1941. Famous Soviet snipers like Vasily Zaitsev, credited with 225 confirmed kills at Stalingrad, became propaganda heroes. The Soviets understood that morale damage from snipers exceeded the physical casualties they inflicted. German adoption of systematic sniper doctrine came later, forced by necessity rather than ideology. The Wehrmacht's initial contempt for sniping as unsporting warfare evaporated under the pressure of Eastern Front casualties. By 1943, German sniper schools were running at full capacity, and the Gewehr 43 was entering production to equip the sharpshooters these schools produced. The American soldier who captured a Gewehr 43 faced an immediate and insurmountable problem. The rifle fired 7.9 2mm Mauser ammunition. American supply chains delivered 30 caliber Springfield. No amount of desire could bridge that gap. A sniper behind enemy lines for days at a time could not resupply from captured German stocks with any reliability. A sniper integrated into American infantry units could not draw compatible ammunition from the company supply sergeant. The rifle might be superior, but the bullets to feed it simply were not in the American supply chain. Capturing ammunition, along with the rifle, provided a temporary solution, but sustained operations required sustained supply, and German supply lines were by definition on the enemy side of the battlefield. Intelligence officers actually wanted captured rifles turned in for analysis, not consumed in the field. Technical exploitation of enemy weapons provided valuable information about German manufacturing capabilities and design philosophy. A rifle that went home as a trophy contributed nothing to the war effort. A rifle that went to Aberdeen Proving Ground for testing contributed potentially useful intelligence. But logistics was only the first obstacle. The Gewehr 43 had reliability issues that German troops understood and American captors did not. The rifle was deliberately overgassed, meaning the gas system bled more propellant energy than strictly necessary to cycle the action. German engineers designed this feature for reliability in extreme conditions. The mud of Russia, where temperatures dropped to minus 40 degrees. The dust of North Africa, where fine particles infiltrated every mechanism. The cold that made lubricants thicken and action sluggish. Overgassing worked, but it accelerated wear on every component. The bolt carrier slammed backward with excessive force, battering the receiver rails. Springs compressed beyond optimal limits and lost tension faster than properly gassed systems would cause. Extractors chipped from the violent cycling. Ejectors bent under repeated stress. A Gewehr 43 that functioned perfectly in German hands, with German maintenance schedules and German spare parts, became problematic when captured by Americans who lacked manuals, specialized tools, and replacement components. German soldiers received training on the rifle's particular needs. They knew to clean the gas system after every engagement. They knew to inspect springs regularly. They knew the signs of impending failure and how to field strip the rifle for emergency repairs. An American soldier picking up a captured rifle knew none of this. The weapon might work perfectly for 50 rounds and then fail catastrophically on the 51st. The rifle also demanded specific ammunition. German lacquered steel case cartridges, designated SME or SS types, had particular pressure curves and burn rates that the gas system expected. Ammunition manufactured after 1943, as German quality control collapsed, often used substitute powders and inferior components. Iron core bullets caused accuracy degradation. Badly annealed cases failed to extract. A captured rifle might come with a magazine full of ammunition that would damage the weapon on the first firing. Friendly fire presented another risk that modern audiences often overlook. The Gewehr 43 produced a distinctive sound when fired, different from any American weapon. In the chaos of combat, where soldiers identified friend and foe partly by the sound of gunfire, an American carrying a German rifle risked being engaged by his own side. The crack of a Mauser cartridge coming from an unexpected direction could trigger reflexive fire from nervous American infantry. Several documented cases exist of Allied soldiers killed by friendly fire while using captured weapons. German troops received orders to destroy their semi-automatic rifles rather than allow capture. Photographs of surrendering Germans frequently show rifles with butts broken off, a quick method of rendering the weapon inoperable. A captured Gewehr 43 was often a damaged Gewehr 43, requiring repair facilities that Americans did not possess. Yet despite these obstacles, Americans wanted the rifle badly. The war trophy culture of World War II was unlike anything before or since. American soldiers collected enemy equipment with passionate enthusiasm, from pistols to flags to helmets to vehicles. The Luger pistol was the most desired trophy, with some soldiers trading months of combat pay for a single example. The P-38 Walther commanded similar interest. Daggers, medals, insignia, and personal effects flowed across the Atlantic in quantities that post-war customs officials could barely process. Rifles held particular interest for men who had used them in combat and could appreciate the engineering differences between weapons. The standard Carabiner 98 was common enough that many soldiers passed them over for more exotic captures. The Sturmgewehr 44 attracted enormous interest for its revolutionary design. The Gewehr 43 occupied a middle ground, rare enough to be valuable but recognizable enough that soldiers understood what they had found. An August 1944 War Department document established formal procedures for war trophies, requiring certificates signed by superior officers, attesting that items were legitimately captured rather than looted from civilians or stolen from supply depots. The paperwork was designed to prevent the worst excesses of trophy hunting while acknowledging the military tradition of battlefield souvenirs. Soldiers who completed the paperwork correctly could ship captured weapons home legally. The system worked imperfectly. Thousands of weapons crossed the Atlantic without proper documentation, hidden in duffel bags and footlockers, smuggled past inspections by soldiers who felt entitled to keep what they had fought for. Rear area troops bribed combat soldiers for trophies. Black markets developed around particularly desirable items. Some soldiers accumulated dozens of captured weapons and shipped them home piece by piece to avoid suspicion. The scoped Gewehr 43 was among the most prized rifle trophies. Here was a weapon visibly superior to American equipment, tangible proof that the enemy possessed capabilities the Americans lacked. The ZF-4 scope alone impressed soldiers who had struggled with fogging, weavers, and rattling mounts. The semi-automatic action amazed men who had cycled bolts while German bullets cracked past their heads. The machined scope rail demonstrated an attention to design that American ordnance had not managed. Thousands of Gewehr 43 rifles came home with returning veterans. The NRA Museum confirms significant numbers in American collections, though exact figures are impossible to determine given the chaotic nature of trophy collection and the incomplete documentation of the era. Many rifles brought back in 1945 remain in American families today, passed from grandfather to father to son, along with the stories of how they were captured. Complete sniper packages, rifle with matching ZF-4 scope and original mounts were the ultimate prize. These combinations were rare even in German service, since scopes were issued separately from rifles and assigned based on accuracy testing rather than serial number matching. A soldier who captured both rifle and scope together had something genuinely valuable, a complete weapon system representing the cutting edge of German technology and worth more than several months of combat pay even in 1945. The collector market today reflects this wartime desirability. Standard Gewehr 43 rifles without scopes sell for between $1,500 and $5,000 depending on condition, matching serial numbers, and manufacturing provenance. All matching rifles in original finish with correct markings command premiums towards $6,000 or beyond. Rare manufacturer codes or unusual variants push prices higher still. Rifles with documented wartime scopes and original mounts command significantly higher prices, often exceeding $10,000 for verified authentic combinations. The authentication process involves matching serial numbers on mount and rifle, verifying that scope manufacturer codes are consistent with the rifle's production date, and examining wear patterns to confirm long-term association between components. Forgeries and mismatched assemblies are common enough that expert evaluation has become essential for high-value transactions. Original ZF-4 scopes alone sell for $350 to over $1,000 depending on manufacturer, condition, and completeness. The rarest manufacturers, particularly AGFA with production code BZZ, command premiums among collectors who appreciate the historical significance of limited production variants. Zeiss examples, of which perhaps 100 were made, are essentially priceless when they appear on the market. Verification presents challenges unique to these weapons. No markings on the rifle itself indicate sniper configuration except on very late 1945 production from Berlin Lübecker Maschinenfabrik, which sometimes stamped ZFK-43 on the stock. The only definitive proof of wartime sniper issue is a scope mount with serial numbers matching the rifle, but mounts were frequently separated from their original rifles over 80 years of collecting, trading, and estate dispersal. Bring back documentation dramatically increases value. A rifle with original capture paperwork bearing the soldier's name and unit, photographs showing the weapon in theatre, or correspondence describing the circumstances of capture represents both historical artifact and verified provenance. The stories matter as much as the metal. Collectors pay premiums for rifles that come with human narratives attached. The man who understood the Gewehr 43 problem best was not German. He was American. John Garand, the Canadian-born engineer who designed the M1 rifle that armed American infantry throughout the war, had been working on a sniper variant since the early 1940s. The fundamental problem was the M1's loading system. The rifle fed from an 8-round en-bloc clip inserted through the top of the receiver and ejected automatically when empty. This top-loading, top-ejecting design made it impossible to mount a scope on the center line of the bore. Any scope on an M1 Garand had to be offset to the left, allowing the clip to load and eject. This offset created parallax problems. A rifle zeroed at 100 meters would shoot progressively to the right at longer ranges, as the geometric relationship between offset scope and bore intersected at only one specific distance. The M1C Garand, adopted in July 1944 as the official sniper rifle replacement for the M1903A4, used a Griffin and Howe side mount that positioned the scope to the left of the receiver. The mounting process required drilling and tapping the hardened receiver, a procedure that sometimes caused warping and accuracy degradation. Heat-treating the drilled receiver with brackets installed created differential thermal expansion between steel components of different masses. The design compromises were obvious even to contemporary observers. Soldiers noted that the M1C was harder to load than a standard Garand, the scope interfering with clip insertion. The side-mounted scope created an unbalanced rifle that wanted to roll in the hands. The sight picture felt unnatural to shooters trained on centerline optics. Production numbers reveal the failure to field this weapon before the war ended. Only 7,971 M1C rifles were manufactured by May 1945, with virtually none reaching combat before Germany surrendered. The rifle existed, but the war ended before it mattered. Garand's simpler solution, the M1D, used a barrel-mounted bracket that avoided drilling the receiver entirely. The design was not adopted until September 1944 and saw no World War II service whatsoever. Both M1 variants would serve in Korea, where their limitations against massed Chinese infantry assaults would echo German experiences with bolt actions against Soviet forces. The fundamental question remained unanswered throughout the war. Could America field a semi-automatic sniper rifle? The Germans had done it, the Soviets had done it with the S5T40. Only the Americans and British clung to bolt actions, and only the Americans seemed unaware of how far behind they had fallen. The legacy of the Gewehr 43 transcends its wartime service. The rifle established a concept that would take decades to mature. The designated marksman rifle integrated into every infantry squad. Modern DMR programs in the United States Army, Marine Corps, and virtually every NATO military trace their intellectual lineage to German thinking crystallized in the Gewehr 43. The idea that every squad needs one soldier with enhanced precision capability, equipped with an optical sight and trained to engage targets at ranges beyond ordinary riflemen, originated in German doctrine of 1943 and 44. The journey from concept to adoption took far longer than it should have. American forces in Korea discovered the same problem that German forces had faced in Russia. Massed Chinese infantry assaults overwhelmed defenders who could only engage one target at a time with bolt-action precision rifles. The M1C and M1D Garands that arrived too late for World War II finally saw combat in Korea, where their semi-automatic action proved valuable against large-scale attacks. Vietnam brought new challenges. Jungle warfare at close range favored automatic weapons and shotguns. The traditional sniper role evolved toward counter-guerrilla operations with long observation periods and single shots at extreme range. The Marine Corps eventually returned to bolt-action rifles with the Remington M40, validating the old argument that for true precision work, the bolt action remained superior. But the designated marksman role, distinct from the traditional sniper, continued to develop. Special operations forces recognized the need for squad-level precision fire. By the 1990s, concepts that German planners had articulated 50 years earlier were finally receiving formal doctrinal recognition in Western armies. The wars in Iraq and Afghanistan accelerated adoption. Urban combat created engagement scenarios where ordinary riflemen could not achieve the necessary precision, but traditional sniper teams were too slow to deploy and too specialized for the situation. Squad-designated marksmen with semi-automatic rifles and magnified optics filled the gap exactly as German planners had intended the Gewehr 43 to fill it. The weapons are different now. The M14 Enhanced Battle Rifle, the M110 Semi-Automatic Sniper System, the HK417, the FNSCAR, all these modern designated marksman rifles fulfill the role that German planners envisioned for the Gewehr 43. Semi-automatic action for rapid follow-up shots, optical sights of 4 to 6 power magnification for precise target identification, integration into regular infantry units rather than segregation into special sniper detachments, effective ranges of 600 to 800 meters, exactly the envelope the Gewehr 43 was designed to cover. The Americans eventually got there, it just took 60 years. Some argue that the Gewehr 43 influenced post-war rifle development directly. The evidence is mixed. American designers certainly examined captured examples at Aberdeen Proving Ground and other testing facilities. Soviet engineers had already created the SVT-40 that the Germans copied, and would go on to develop the SVD Dragunov designated marksman rifle that served for decades. The cross-pollination of ideas is undeniable, but direct mechanical lineage is harder to trace. The M14 used a completely different operating system, a rotating bolt with a long-stroke piston rather than the Gewehr 43's tilting bolt and short-stroke system. The FAL used a tilting bolt but with different geometry. The AK-47, ironically designed by a man who encountered German weapons on the Eastern Front, used yet another variation on the gas-operated theme. The Gewehr 43 may have influenced thinking without directly influencing manufacturing drawings. What the rifle unquestionably demonstrated was the viability of the semi-automatic precision rifle concept. Skeptics who claim that semi-automatic actions would never achieve acceptable accuracy were proven wrong. The gas system's movement during firing did affect precision, but not enough to matter at practical combat ranges. The advantages of rapid follow-up shots outweighed the theoretical accuracy penalty for all engagements under 800 meters. The bolt-action sniper rifle did not disappear. Traditional snipers engaging single targets at extreme range continued to prefer manually operated actions. The Marine Corps returned to bolt actions with the Remington M40 after Vietnam, and modern sniper rifles like the M24 and M2010 remain manually operated. For shots beyond 800 meters, for one-shot eliminations where the sniper cannot afford to miss and cannot risk the target hearing the first shot, the bolt action retains advantages. But the designated marksman, the soldier bridging the gap between rifleman and sniper, now carries a semi-automatic rifle with an optical sight. The Gewehr 43 was right about this before anyone else. The rain stopped on the 4th day. The corporal from Wisconsin turned the captured German rifle over to intelligence officers, who tagged it for technical evaluation, photographed it, and shipped it somewhere he would never know. He went back to his Springfield with its foggy scope and its 5-round magazine and its bolt that had to be cycled between every shot. He survived Normandy. He survived the hedgerows and the breakout and the push across France. He survived the Bulge and the crossing of the Rhine and the final collapse of Nazi Germany. Men like him, decades later, in veterans' homes across America, told their grandchildren about the hedgerows, about the German who could see them when they could not see the German, about the rifles they found and the scopes that showed them what real precision equipment looked like, about turning them in because they could not get ammunition, because they could not maintain them, because carrying an enemy weapon would get them killed by their own side. They remembered the weight of those rifles, the balance, the glass that showed them the war clearly for the first time. The German rifle was better, they said. Everyone knew it, we just could not use it. The Gewehr 43, the rifle American snipers wanted but could never truly have, the weapon that proved what was possible decades before anyone acted on the lesson. The trophy that thousands brought home as proof that the enemy had figured out something important, something the American military would not fully embrace until the next century. In the hedgerows of Normandy, in the forests of the Ardennes, in the rubble of German cities, American soldiers encountered a vision of infantry combat's future. They picked it up, admired it, and put it down again. The ammunition did not fit. The parts were not available. The sound would get them killed. But they remembered. And decades later, their grandsons carried rifles built on the same principles, semi-automatic actions with optical sights, integrated into every squad. The designated marksman rifle, the concept the Germans pioneered and the Americans eventually adopted. Veterans who held those captured rifles never forgot the moment, the weight, the scope that let them see, the war the way it actually was, not the way the movies showed it. American soldiers fighting with inferior equipment, winning anyway, bringing home trophies from the enemy because the enemy had built something worth keeping. The Gewehr 43, The rifle that changed how armies think about precision fire. The trophy that proved the point. The war machine that worked.